Welcome to episode 2 of the Yurok Tribe Language Program's Yurok in 20 podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to provide a space for Yurok language learners to listen to elder audio, follow along with short lessons, practice speaking and listening to Yurok language, and touch upon Yurok culture as it relates to what we're learning. Each episode will be 20 minutes or less, so please join us as you're cleaning, working out, or driving to work. Here in episode 2, we're going to start learning about how to introduce ourselves in Yurok. Let's speak Yurok together. As with many things, traditionally, naming worked differently than it does today. A Yurok person could have many names throughout their life and even be known by different names from person to person. If you're revisiting this episode, you can jump right to timestamp 6 minutes 58 seconds if you'd like to go straight to the lesson. Let's listen to our collections coordinator, Barbara McQuillan, speak a little bit about traditional naming.
When children were born, traditionally we didn't name our children for 10 days.
Many Yurok families still follow this traditional practice. So, Barbara, what are some of the ways Yurok children got their name?
Yurok names for boys sometimes were just kind of silly names. Same for little girls that were words that didn't really mean anything. They were just names. Or they could call a little girl Perkwarawa, rabbit's wife. A little boy Pekwan Owa, like be married at Pekwan. Well, we know little boys don't get married. It was just kind of a cute little thing, a playful thing to do. When a child was married, say a boy was married, their name would change. He would drop that childhood name, have a new name, and it could be into the village that he was married into or the name of his village.
So, as your life circumstances changed, your name would change. What were some other ways that adults would be named?
If a man had a house, he could be named after that house in the village that he came from. Lagoon George was called that. He was Ki Aketa, meaning the man from the lagoon.
Yeah, my great-great-grandfather.
A lot of times men would take names of things that they were known for. If they did something well, a dance leader or something, they would be called by that name, like Turet Megwala. He was the head man, the medicine man for the deerskin dance and the brush dance in that village. So he would take that Megwala, which means he's a dance leader in that village. If a man didn't own a house, he would take the name of the wife's house from the village that she came from. It could be like Pekwan Owa, means he's married at Pekwan or whatever village it is, but he'd take the name of the wife's village, the house or the village. If a man was known as Pekwan Owa and he moved somewhere else, he would not take the name of that village. He would still be called Pekwan Owa. Brittany, did you want to add anything?
Marriages and family life also just work differently then. At this point in your life, you could have been called by several names. So far, we've talked about your first name, your childhood names, some of the ways that you could be named as an adult. You could be called something in your later years, in your elderhood. So, the old man of such and such place, or the old woman of such and such place, the widow of so and so, or the widow of a certain place. Can you explain a little bit about how we would refer to people after they've passed on, that last stage of life?
In Yurok culture, people aren't supposed to mention somebody's name after they pass on. It's kind of traditionally known in Yurok country that you don't talk about somebody after they've passed on and to not say their name for a long period of time. That family that's grieving, you don't show disrespect by saying their name.
Of course, today we have namesakes and we have pictures and videos of our loved ones that are gone. So a lot of people will say, ah, walk, before somebody's name that's passed away. And we'll hear it in English as well. We'll hear people saying, poor so and so, or poor sister, my poor grandma. So, were there other ways that people were named, maybe outside of stages of life or ages?
If you were talking about somebody that spoke a different language, you could call them Sa'agachish. the ones that speak Yurok, or Talawesh, the ones that speak Talawa. You could refer to them like that.
Your name could be given to you by how you age, how you have a change in life circumstances, like getting married or being widowed, by where you come from or you marry into, or something you were known for.
Yeah, and names would change. You would have to be part of the conversation sometimes because several people could have the same name. You would have to know who you're talking about, whether this young man from Turup did something, and everybody knew when you talked about Turep Achin, you knew you were talking about that particular young man from Turep. I don't think we could get away with it today, changing our names, because we have all these legal things that we have to go by and given names that are on all of our documents and stuff. So to go back that way traditionally would be kind of hard.
Thank you, Barbara, for sharing about traditional naming. It's always a treat to learn more about how things were done before contact and in the traditional way of life. As we touched on earlier, saying the name of someone's relative that's passed away is considered a great offense. And in Yurok culture, when you offend someone, you should make payment to them to settle up the dispute. In Yurok culture, once payment's made for an offense, it's never brought up again, so both parties can move forward. This is part of our law. We'd really like to share elder audio as often as possible, and to credit those that put so much time and effort into the documentation of our language. As mentioned earlier, for those that have passed away, we'll say awok either before or after their name, out of respect for their relatives and their loved ones. It's almost like a trigger warning for people that you're going to speak someone's name that's gone. This is still really common practice, and you'll hear people doing it in English as well. Poor so-and-so. Let's get into our first lesson. The first word you're going to learn is the word for I am called, now. From here on, when you hear the sound of this necklace, it means you're about to hear a first language speaker pronunciation. And when you hear this tone, it means it's your turn to repeat what you've heard. Let's hear now, I am called, pronounced by Awok Jimmy James.
No. No.
I am called. Now. 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 I'm called Brittany. Now, Brittany. Now, Brittany. Now, Brittany. Now try replacing Brittany with your own name. Now, Brittany. Numiskuyen. That's really good. In Yurok, word order can be flexible sometimes. In this case, you can say, now, Brittany, or Brittany, now. Try it out. Remember to replace Brittany with your own name. Now, Brittany. Brittany, now. Okay, let's move on. You can always check the show notes for timestamps if you want to go back and practice now some more. Here's your first question phrase. What are you called?
Cusco. Cusco.
What are you called? Cusco. 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 You might be starting to notice that we're using sounds that don't exist in English. Let's practice them. The first sound we're going to practice is the ow sound. Ow. Ow. You can hear it in now, and then again in cow. In episode 1, we introduced the Yurok language program crew. One of our teachers, James, he calls this sound the Elmer Fudd sound, because Elmer Fudd always says, whale, whale, whale.
Very quiet. I'm hunting rabbits.
The next sound we're going to talk about is the Yurok S. This sound is still really prevalent in Yurok people, even in English. So you'll hear sometimes people will say Pepsi, but they'll say Pepsi. So it's a slight difference there, but in English, S is like S, S. Your mouth's a little bit tighter together. And a Yurok S is more like S, S. So your jaw is a little bit more forward and your teeth are a little bit closer. It's not quite a sh sound, but it's kind of in between an English s and an English sh. So it's right in the middle there. So you can hear it in the word kues, kues, sh, kues, kues. The last sound that we're going to focus in on is the K glottal sound. We sometimes call it a clicky K. And when we write in Yurok, we use an apostrophe to mark the glottal. Glottal just means you're stopping sound. It's a glottal stop. You're stopping sound. You're stopping air. Sometimes we call it a clicky K because it sounds like. First, let's make a regular K sound, as in kush, k, 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 kush, kush. And then, if we hold our breath, we can make a K glottal or a clicky K. If we compare the K and the K glottal, it sounds like k versus k. So you can hear that one is more breathy and the other one has no air. K, k. Regular K as in kush. Clicky K as in cow. Kush, cow, kush, cow. So here's your challenge. As you're listening and learning, keep an ear out for those ew, the Yurok S sound, sh, and that clicky K glottal sound. Now it's time for a no pressure refresher. I am called. No. No. I'm called Brittany. No, Brittany. Brittany, no. What are you called? Kusko. 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 Let's add the last bit of vocabulary for this episode. What is he, she, it called?
Kushwell. Kushwell.
Yurok has no gender in the third person, so you can use this for anyone or anything that you're asking the name of. What is he called? Kushwell. 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 Let's do our final no pressure refresher. I am called. No. No. I'm called Brittany. No, Brittany. Brittany, no. What are you called? Kusko. Kusko. What is he called? Kushwell. What is she called? Kushwell. What is it called? Kushwell. Thank you so much for spending your time learning Yurok with us. We're really excited to be able to share with you on this platform. I'd like to give a special thanks to Barbara McQuillan for sharing some information about traditional naming. You can listen to a longer video version about naming in our virtual classroom. I'll link it in the show notes. I'd also like to express our love and gratitude for all the first language speakers that work tirelessly to preserve and document our language. We continue to learn from them every day. Any elder audio that I add will be noted in the timestamps in the show notes. This episode marks the beginning of our Village Learning Pathway, a system we use for scaffolded learning that begins in Upriver Yurok territory. Each village is a unit of learning, and within the village there are houses, which are bite-sized lessons. You'll learn more and more Yurok as you make your way down the river toward the mouth. Check the show notes for a link for more information about our village learning pathway. If you're excited to learn more Yurok, check out www.yuroklanguage.com and make sure to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I'll link all of our profiles in the show notes. If you'd like to be a part of our email listserv, I'll add my email address in the show notes as well. Our Yurok language event calendar shows all in-person, hybrid, and virtual learning opportunities. Check out the show notes for a link. Thanks again for listening. To learn more about the Yurok language program staff, listen to episode 1. In episode 3, you'll learn 2 survival phrases and then use them for a comprehension check about what you've learned here in episode 2. Keep listening for more from the Village Learning Pathway, Elder audio recordings, cultural connections, Yurok Phonics, Yurok language songs, scripted episodes where you can practice listening to real-time fluid conversations, and Yurok language request episodes where we answer real Yurok language learner questions. If you'd like to submit a question of your own, find the Yurok language request form link in the show notes. Talk kitagara. We'll talk again. Exas un